friends, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Brittany and I'm a newly graduated registered nurse. So I just wanted to talk about my last year of nursing school, the process of taking the NCLEX and registering with the College of Nurses to be able to practice in Ontario, and talk about how I got my first nursing job. So if that is something that interests you, without further ado, let's get into it. So I did my hospital clinical during the fall semester. So the group of students I was in was the first batch going back after we were all pulled from the hospital in third year. So we were the first batch of students going back into the hospital to do clinicals, like the first batch of nursing students. So the placement options were a bit limited just because the first group of students going in, like obviously with COVID, they wanted to be careful about what units they were putting us on and all that kind of stuff. So some tips for your placement in your final year of schooling. So if you have been on a unit in your previous 3 years or 2 years, if you're doing the practical nurse course, that you really enjoyed, I would recommend trying to get back on that unit, like if that is somewhere you can see yourself working. As in last year, you are working full-time one-on-one with the preceptor, so if it's a unit that you think you might want to work on, having that additional experience is going to be great. Like you're going to be able to see what the floor is actually like outside of working in like a group of students, if you know what I mean. If you haven't found a unit that you are really in love with and think you want to work on, then I would recommend picking something that interests you. So for instance, one of the options I had selected was the psychiatry floor because that was something that I thought might interest me. Another tip is don't be afraid to offer your help to the other nurses. So obviously you're going to have to learn a lot of time management because you are going to be managing a full patient load in your last year, and you are the one who is going to be primarily responsible. Your preceptor kind of just steps back and lets you handle things the way you think you should. And I would highly encourage you to offer your help to the other nurses on the floor. They may have skills that you've never done before, new learning opportunities for you, so really put yourself out there to get all the learning opportunities that you can while you're still in school. So moving on from placements, I want to talk about your last class in nursing school. So mine was called Transitions to Professional Practice. It may be called different things at different schools. So in your last class, the one that is kind of going through a review of the stuff you've learned in nursing school, it's so important to take really good notes and to study hard for that class, because this is basically preparation for your NCLEX. So all the information that you're learning in this class is stuff that could potentially be on your licensing exam. So when you're going through this class, I would encourage you to kind of take note about the areas that you are finding yourself struggling on, areas you need to focus on, and go to the exam reviews if they have them. So this is a great way to see what questions you're getting wrong, to see what areas you may be struggling in, what formats of questions that you're having difficulty with, and this can help you to gear your studying for the NCLEX. So my tips for the NCLEX, studying for it, do lots of practice questions. Honestly, this is the best studying you can do is the practice questions, because a lot of it is kind of learning what the test wants you to answer. So you'll find a lot of recurring themes, a lot of concepts and ideas that keep popping up. So doing a lot of practice questions can help you understand what that question is asking you for and answer it the way they want you to answer. So I used UWorld to study. If you guys want like a more in-depth video of how I studied for the NCLEX, I can definitely make that for you. But I used UWorld, and the practice questions on there are so good. With that, you can tailor it to certain areas. So for instance, you're going to look back on the areas that you struggled with in your final class. So say you were having difficulties with the musculoskeletal system, You can choose questions just on that system to have you practice that more. When writing your exam, just try to remain calm. Take each question as it comes. Once you've answered that and moved on to the next question, forget about the last question, and it's like you're starting over each new question. Just once one question is done, okay, that's done, let's not think about it, and time to focus on this new question. So after I wrote my exam and passed, I was able to register with the College of Nurses of Ontario. So once I was registered and officially a registered nurse, I started applying for jobs. So I applied to a couple hospitals local to me, and then I also applied to a couple hospitals in the States. And I ended up hearing back from one of the hospitals, and they wanted to do an interview. So the interview process for this hospital was honestly pretty general. They didn't ask a lot of specific nursing questions. So when I did start my interview, the interviewer asked me which unit I had applied for. So at this particular hospital, I had applied for the Women's and Children and the Psychiatry unit. So I told him those were the ones I applied to, and he asked if I had a preference of what unit I would like to work on. So I knew I wanted to do Women's and Children, so I told him that's where I've always seen myself being as a nurse, but I also said that I was just eager to start working and gaining more experience, so any unit that needed an extra set of hands, I would be willing to work on. So he asked about a time I had had a conflict with a patient and how I handled it, a time I had had a conflict with a coworker and how I handled it. He also asked how I deal with stress if I'm having a stressful day. So these kind of questions are just trying to gauge how you're going to be in that environment. So obviously, nursing can be a stressful environment. You will have conflicts with patients and coworkers, like it's kind of unavoidable. No matter how unconfrontational you are, like conflicts do arise in the workplace. So he kind of just wanted to see how you would deal with these type of things. So another thing I would encourage, if you are applying to places, if you get a call back to do an interview, make sure you do a little bit of research on the organization. So know their mission statement, know what their values are, because I did get asked a question on this, if I knew what the values are, and from those values I had to choose one of them and give an example of how I demonstrated that in my professional practice. I would also recommend, if they ask you at the end of the interview, if you have any questions, please ask them some questions. Not asking questions kind of shows that you're not really interested in the organization or the job. So two of the questions I asked at the end of my interview were what the person liked most about working for that hospital. Then I also asked about what kind of opportunities they have for further advancing your career within the hospital. So after I was finished my interview, the man doing the interview told me that I would hear from the hospital within a few days if they decided to move forward. So I did my interview on a Tuesday. So I was hoping, like, okay, within a few days I should hear back by Friday. Well, I didn't hear anything Friday. Obviously, I knew I wasn't going to hear anything over the weekend. Monday came around, I still didn't hear anything, and I was really starting to lose hope in getting that grade. I thought I did well during my interview, but when he had told me, oh, you would hear back within a couple days, I was like, okay, obviously it's been almost a week now, I haven't heard anything back, so pretty sure I didn't get it. So I was messaging a couple of my friends saying, oh, I don't think I got it. Well, then they ended up calling me on my lunch break that day. So someone from Human Resources called and said that the clinical manager from the Women's and Children floor was very interested in my interview and would love to chat further with me. So I ended up having a Skype call that same day after I was finished work. So in that Skype call, I met with the clinical manager of the Women's and Children floor. She kind of talked about how the unit runs, what their orientation process is like, what kind of patients you get on the unit, talked about what different beds make up the unit. and she asked me if it was a floor that I would be interested in working on. So obviously I said, of course I would be interested in working on this floor. Like, this is my dream, the unit that I have always wanted to work on. So she asked if I would be available for orientation starting September 13th, and I said I would be. But she said she couldn't officially hire me, like it had to come from human resources. But she said, like, act surprised when you get the phone call, and she also said, like, oh, you can tell your family that you got your first nursing job. So once that was done, I called my mom, told my fiance, told a bunch of my friends. I was like, oh my gosh, guys, I like unofficially got the job. I just have to wait for the call from HR. Well, does another week not go by? And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, she told me, like, she asked me if I would be able to start orientation. She told me I could tell my friends and family that I got a nursing job. Like, why hasn't HR called me? So it was a week later, on the following Tuesday, that they called with an offer of employment, so a regular part-time position on the women's and children floor. So I accepted that offer. So the first week is going to be a hospital-wide clinical orientation, so all of the new hires, going through policies and stuff like that. And then after that first week is when I will move on to my unit and start doing the specific orientation for that. So anyways, please leave any questions you have about nursing school or the NCLEX or interviewing process in the comment section down below. I'd love to share what knowledge I have with you guys. Obviously, everyone is going to be different, but I would love to share what I've learned in my past 5 years going through nursing school, and I will continue to share about my new job. Alright, that's it for today. Bye, guys. Then I also asked, oh my gosh, why can I not speak right now? Okay.